Everyone, welcome back. Today I want to take a look at the major artistic developments of the 17th and 18th centuries as we go through Baroque, Rococo, and Neoclassical visual art. We've been taking a look at before the main elements of Baroque art, which is much more intense, have the darker, dramatic kind of lighting, which is called tenebrism or chiaroscuro, as we've talked about. Mainly capturing things in action, in movement, in order to create the intensity of a moment. Here we see the sacrifice of Isaac, and so Abraham is taking the knife, and Isaac is yelling out, kind of screaming for his life. But gone are the days of this kind of peaceful, serene Renaissance rendition of what this would look like. They wanted to focus more on intensity and emotion, and to capture more of the complexity of the era that they're living in, of constant religious and political conflict. That art starts to reflect that turmoil, starts to reflect some of those anxieties. We see this with the incredulity of St. Thomas, or the foolishness of Thomas, who says, lest I see the spear prints or the nail prints in his hands and his feet, I will not believe. And so here you see him getting a really close investigation of the spear wound, and putting his finger inside so that he can believe. But again, the whole idea of foreshortening the background and providing this lighting, in addition to providing that intensity, is to invite us in, to draw the viewer in, to participate into this particular setting, to think about how many doubts do we have and what should we do with doubts. And we've talked about before in the last lecture about how important it is for the 17th and 18th century to grapple with that doubt, and to know what to do, and how science is beginning to move away from religion and to say we need to see the world as it really is, not how the Bible necessarily says it is, but how it actually is, because the Bible might be an oversimplified version of creation. And we need to avoid using traditions in order to understand the reality. And so doubt is going to be important. And Caravaggio has his own kind of, discussion within this, his own commentary on doubt and whether that is important. It seems like here he's suggesting that doubt perhaps leads to a lack of faith. And so this is his commentary on it. But we see in the sciences they have a different kind of discussion. But Caravaggio becomes that founding element that really sets the style for the Baroque era. If you're ever in Rome, you will notice that Caravaggio is pretty much everywhere. Last year, when I took a group of students to Europe, I decided to go on a suicide mission to see if I can find every Caravaggio in Rome. And while students were off kind of doing their own studies, their own investigations, I just did this kind of one-man mission to see if I can find all of Caravaggio's. And Rome is a great city. It's very beautiful, and there's a lot of history there. The one downside of Rome is that they don't really have a good metro system. In Paris, they have the metro, and in London, they have the tube, and those are really good to be able to get, back and forth between parts of the town. In Rome, as they were building the metro system, every time they would start digging, they would find an ancient relic or an old kind of archaeological dig, and so every time they were digging, it didn't become this archaeological find, so they'd have to stop, and then they had to bring in archaeologists, and they'd have to dig it up, and then it was a whole process. And so there really isn't a very good metro in Rome. There is. They have it does two lines. There's a north and south, and an east and west, and so it just kind of makes this cross, but not that many. It's not really that functional. It smells really bad. It's really run down, and it's mainly where people go to get pickpocketed. And so generally, I avoid it. And we, as BYUI goes there, we generally tell our students to avoid it, just because it's not very efficient. And so that means there's a lot of walking. And so I walked to all the churches, which there's just like in Rexburg, there's a church on every corner. In Rome, there's a church on every corner, and generally there's some type of masterpiece inside it. And a lot of the churches are filled with Caravaggio. And so here you see the crucifixion of St. Peter and then the conversion of St. Paul in the Popolo. And this one is just another church. This one is the martyrdom of St. Matthew, or this one that is the Judith and Holofernes. And so as I went to all these, I mean, it was really cool to see them. It's, going to see art is almost like going to see an old friend, right? Things that you study, things that you're spending time with and teaching. So it's great to see, but really cool, really exhausting, but really important to get the sense of what the Baroque era is all about. What happens is at the turn of the century, right around the 1715, Louis the 14th, the Sun King, we talked about him at that Versailles, he dies, and his grandson, Louis the 15th, is not quite old enough to take over, and so momentarily the Duke of Orleans takes over in France. And as France has become the cultural center of the world, he changes art, and he changes the way that art looks, and he implements a new style. He believed that Baroque was too dynamic, too harsh. He wanted to lighten it up, and so he developed what is known as the Rococo style. Rococo is similar to Baroque. It has similar themes to it, but it's going to have a different type of mood. Mainly, it's going to project the values of the wealthy and why they're in power, and that's very similar to the Baroque era. We see some of those underlying principles of why the church is in power, right, or why the leaders are in power. We talked about how the symbol, the main architectural establishment of the Baroque era is the Palace of Versailles. But what Rococo does, it takes those ideas, those values, and it actually just makes them a little bit lighter, right? So you're going to see more pastels, light pinks, light blues, light greens that dominate the particular work. And it really is about the lifestyles of the rich and famous, very superficial pleasures that very rich people have. And so in some ways, this is kind of leading up to the French and American revolutions. In some ways, this helps to visualize some of the problems, some of those discrepancies that we've talked about in the previous lecture about how much money and access to resources the rich have and how little those at the bottom have. And so in some ways, this, unwittingly, unintendedly helps to bring about the French Revolution, because it says, yes, this is why they're completely aloof and they don't really care about us. And Watteau's pilgrimage to the island of Cythera. Cythera is the island where Aphrodite was raised. And so it has this connotation of love and sensuality, which is going to be a big part of the Rococo type of art. But it's this mythical land. It doesn't really exist. And so here you have all of the wealthy elites kind of taking their mistresses off to this pilgrimage to this Cythera, this island of Cythera, in order to have a riotous, shall we say, weekend. But you can see that the emphasis on the pinks, the light pastels, the greens, which is mainly focusing on fertility and growth, that really dominate this. And so we see the reintroduction, the reimportance of classical themes like Greek mythology being shown within a contemporary context of these individuals wearing contemporary clothes and trying to partake in those kind of sneaky deceits. But the idea, again, is to suggest that the wealthy are like the gods. They should be worshipped like the gods, and so it should be okay for them to be able to have so much and have such a kind of a lifestyle of superficial frivolousness. And so in some ways they're trying to present this as propaganda to say, hey, aren't we like the gods? Don't we deserve this? But in some ways it actually backfires, and it shows, hey, why they have so much. This one is another one I just wanted to show you. This one is a Cyborg of Besant. This one is just an average art dealer. So if you want to know what an art gallery would have looked like during the 18th century, this is what it would look like. You'd just have from the floor to the ceiling, you'd have art coming in, and you'd go in and you would pick out the one art, and then they would box it up and they would ship it for you. But again, this is showing what the wealthy value, right? Who are the ones that are buying art in our life, right? It's going to be the mainly the wealthy, and this is the same in the 18th century. The people that are going in don't really have to worry about food. They don't have to worry about having a roof over their head. They don't really have to worry about work. So they can spend their money on things that, generally don't really help with your survival. These are people that are mainly trying to escape that and to display their wealth and kind of throwing their money away. This kind of idea of you don't necessarily have to worry about money because you're so wealthy was kind of the mindset. And so you have these wealthy individuals here off kind of talking, and this individual kind of looking in a mirror, kind of showing their vanity, or these individuals that are inspecting their Rococo art, which focuses again on this kind of element of sensuality and lust and desires. And it's not necessarily like the Baroque era shows some of the hardships, some of the negative sides of that. It's kind of a moral lesson, and we saw that with Rembrandt's Bathsheba, and she makes this tough decision between being loyal to the king or loyal to her husband. Or we see this a little bit more with Honthorst as the young man is guided in to see the young woman, and is leading to his demise, this kind of idea of foolishness. Here we just see that complete embrace. It's a different kind of tone, a different type of mood that's being emphasized here. And here you see this is a portrait of Louis XIV, the Sun King, being put away, and a new work of art kind of being put up in his place. And so the idea here is that the older style, the Baroque, the seriousness of the older era is being put away with the passage of time. Here you have a clock over his head, that now we're entering into a new phase that's less serious, that's more frivolous. Let's focus on having fun. And that's really what Louis XIV wanted for the court. He wanted them to have fun so he can kind of manipulate them and get his way a little bit more and have more power and influence. But that idea, that builds a legacy, and people are starting to focus more on frivolous things, and again, less on the people. So again, this is going to lead up to more of the tensions, and we're going to see these tensions come to a head with Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. Taking a look at another artist, Fragonard. This is the meeting. Again, what we see here are two individuals that are kind of secretly having this rendezvous. So people that probably have relationships with other people, but now they're having this, extra relationship here. They're having this affair, and they're kind of looking off into the distance to see if she was followed as they're meeting up. And he's kind of climbing up. Here's a ladder on this balcony in order to meet up for their meeting. And then you have Venus and Cupid as a statue that kind of watches over them, encased within this garden, this lush garden of fertility and life. And so it's, again, focusing on the passions, but seeing if we can get away with things. So the idea of the lifestyles of the rich and famous of the era is that they didn't necessarily, they had social rules, they have marriages, but those were all just for political alliance. They weren't necessarily for love. The whole idea was to see if you can get away with something, and that was what they valued. This idea of we don't really have to worry about serious things. We have the freedom to be able to just have fun with life. Meanwhile, the working class is off supporting this, and so again, that's going to lead to some future problems. Or the swing, you guys have probably seen this one before. This one's kind of the pinnacle of Rococo, focusing on, notice the colors, the lighting is different, right? We see a little bit of darkness with the poor sap here who's pushing her in the swing, and then this guy here's strategically stationed in the bushes below. There's a little bit of light, but it's not that intensity of the Baroque era. It's mainly focusing on this kind of lightness, this kind of frivolousness. And here we see as she's being pushed here by her, perhaps, her fiance, and she's kind of laughing and giggling, and he just thinks, hey, she's laughing because she's having fun with me. But what she's really laughing at is her, boyfriend is stationed in the bushes, and so she's kind of, laughing to him to see if they can get away with it, and they're having this kind of secret kind of insights, or this, what do they call it? This kind of secret connection between them. And then she gives him a little token, right? This is my favorite part of the image here. Gives him a little token for him to then be able to return later. And then you have Cupid overhead another statue referring to ancient myths of gods and goddesses, and so that's how they kind of saw themselves, as being able to be free to do what they want like the gods and goddesses. And here Cupid is holding his finger up to his lips to say shh. This is in the Wallace collection, the Fragonard's The Swing. It's actually in London. And I just wanted to go and see it last time we were there, just because it's such an important piece. And you can see it's right next to it in this case is the actual shoe that was modeled after, so you get to see that kind of cultural significance as well. But what we're going to see is with neoclassical art, there's going to be a different type of theme, a different type of ideas that are emerging, mainly that are influenced by Herculaneum and Pompeii being discovered in the early to mid 1700s, and these are ancient ruins in Italy that were uncovered. Initially, they were completely lost because of volcanic eruption. But as archaeologists were going in, they discovered them, and they said, "Hey, this is kind of interesting. Let's see what this society look like, to see if we can learn more about the ancients." And this is coming in at a time when scientists and politicians are trying to say, hey, can we find other ways of doing things? And so in politics, going back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome become important, not in the same way as they were during the Renaissance, when they're trying to understand aspects of religious truth. What we see during the 1700s is they're trying to understand what's the aspect of trying to find the happiest way of living, right? What can provide the most amount of happiness? And so political philosophers go back to ancient Greece and Rome to understand the ideas of a republic, to understand the ideas of a democracy. And so Herculaneum and Pompeii become part of that, and it just creates more energy, more excitement of going back to the past. And so neo means new, right? So a new appreciation of classical ideas, classical values. We see that starting to influence politics. We've talked a little bit about that in the lecture where we go over Locke and Rousseau, and them trying to think about how do we establish a new political government that's away from the kings and queens. Can we have more of a voice? Can we have democracy? Can we have a republic? And then in art, we see a similar aspect of this. We're going to reappreciate, revalue classical themes within our art. And it really starts here with this. And so it brings us about this classical era. And we see some classicism within Rococo, right? We see this with Venus and Cupid mainly focusing on love and sensuality. But what we're going to see with the application of classical ideas and neoclassicism is more of a political kind of driving force. Jacques-Louis David is probably the most important artist of the 18th century by far, right? He comes from France, and he mainly is picked up very quickly by the aristocracy, but he becomes the king's painter. The king sees his ideas and sees his passion, sees his energy, and says, this is the future of art. And so as he's being influenced by Herculaneum and Pompeii and these new classical ideas, and influenced by all of these new ideas of politics, he starts painting them. But he's painting in some ways with neoclassicism, painting these old classical ideas and bringing them in within a contemporary kind of thought process. Here we see the death of Socrates, who is being put to death for treason, being put to death for sedition, being put to death for corrupting the youth, and being put to death for impiety. And the only evidence that they had against Socrates was by a play written by Aristophanes called The Clouds, which has a character that resembles Socrates in there, and he becomes impious. He corrupts the youth. It seems as though he's questioning the government. And so they use that fictional work written by Aristophanes as evidence against Socrates for his crimes. But really what they were afraid of is that he was teaching people to think for themselves. And this is exactly what we see that people like Immanuel Kant is pushing for during this time. They're starting to push for people need to be educated, to liberate themselves from self-imposed immaturity, to be able to think and act for themselves. And the state generally sees that as a dangerous act. Why doesn't the state want people to think for themselves? Because what are they going to do? They're going to start questioning, why is it that someone has so much power and other people don't, right? And they don't necessarily want that. And so they saw Socrates as a threat, so they put him to death. And here he is about ready to take the drink from this young student's hand, the hemlock, the poison that he's going to drink and kill himself. And his wife is being escorted out of the room before he does that, and she's kind of waving goodbye. And here, even in his kind of death, he's defiant and pointing to say, hey, it's better that I die by my own hand than for them to give them the satisfaction of putting me to death for something that is unjust. And at the foot of the bed, we see his prize student, Plato, who was extremely important during the Renaissance, kind of mourning, kind of looking down at the loss of his teacher, and these other people are freaking out. But the idea here is a political ideal worth dying for? And that's something that is extremely important for the members of the Enlightenment. So what's interesting about David is even though he becomes the king's painter, and he's painting these ideas, he actually helps to undermine the king's authority unintentionally, right? And so what the king wants people to kind of think about when they see this kind of image is, yes, we need to be loyal, and you need to be willing to die in behalf of the king, right? But how people interpret it instead is you need to be willing to die for the good of the people, for the good of a political idea, for the best of society. And so a very different message is being interpreted and being applied by society. But you can take a look at that. There's a different kind of mood, a different feel between the Rococo art and Neoclassical art, right? One is kind of frivolous. That doesn't really have a lot of depth. Or it's just mainly saying, hey, life should be fun. Let's live life to the fullest. Carpe diem. Seize the moment. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And another one that has a much more serious bent of, we need to protest against tyranny. We need to fight against the political errors of our day. We need to try to fix them, right? And so, in what we see happening during the Renaissance with the Reformation, right? We see corruption. We need to fix it. We now see that being applied to political institutions. We see the corruption. Now we need to fix it, and that's happening during the 19th century. And it's going to lead into this modern political state that we have today. I just want to go through another one of these by Jacques-Louis David, and it's pronounced David. So if you say, David, if you say, hey, have you ever heard of Jacques-Louis David? People aren't going to know what you're talking about. But if you say, have you ever seen David's The Oath of the Heredia? People know exactly what you're talking about, just because it's French, and so you have to kind of have a French pronunciation to it. Just as a side note. But anyway, The Oath of the Heredia. What we see within this one is the idea of Horace. Horace is the emperor of Rome, and he is currently going into battle with his neighboring city-state of the Albas, and they've entered into this long quagmire, this never-ending type of a war. And so what happens is Horace goes to Alba and says, hey, why don't you send 3 of your sons, and I'll send 3 of my sons, and they will battle it out, and the winner take all, right? And so there's this kind of a way to spare, thousands of people from further bloodshed and to end this kind of never-ending conflict. And so the Alba agree to that, and so this is Horace's 3 sons taking on, right? He's asking them, will you fight for the good of Rome? Will you fight in my behalf? And again, what we see is the 3 sons kind of embracing each other. We have one arm around them, and they're all pledging their allegiance to the emperor, and he's now receiving them and going to give them swords to fight in the behalf of Rome. And so what we see here, again, is a very political message. Is a political ideal worth fighting for? For the founding fathers in the United States, is a political deal worth fighting for and dying for, right? Or is it not? And so again, the king kind of sees this and says, hey, this is great. You should be allying with me, the king of France. But the people see it as, no, we need to be aligned with a political ideal that's bigger than us. And so they interpret it again differently. And so even though they're trying to use this as propaganda to further the strength and the authority of the king, it actually helps to undermine that. And to juxtapose, right, their kind of bravery, their honor, we see the woman on the far right-hand side, right? They're overwhelmed, they're emotional, they're saddened for this fight. The woman in the center is Sabina. She is a sister to the Curati, and she's married to one of Horus's. She's married to one of Horus's sons. Either way, she's going to lose someone. Another is Camilla on the far right. She's a sister of one of the Hereti and wife to one of the other people, right? So either way, she is going to lose someone. And then the other one is probably, the one in the background is probably the mother, right? And so what we see here is the sacrifice, right? The elements of stoic men willing to fight with honor and bravery for the good of Rome, for the good of their people, right? A classical subject of ancient Rome, but it's again being applied to a very contemporary kind of feel. This one's currently in the Louvre in Paris, and so we can see that just to give you the sense of size in its context. Also, I just wanted to kind of leave off with David. What we see is the death of Marat. Marat was a revolutionary individual fighting for the French Revolution, calling for change, calling for political reform. And what we see here is he is, as he's fighting, he's mainly known for his words and he's very eloquent with the way he wrote, and inspired a lot of people to go off and to fight for the good of France. But one particular person, some people didn't really like him. One was Charlotte Corday. She sneaks into his apartment and takes out a knife that she had stuck to her thigh, and she stabs him in the chest. And this one's this kind of chest wound's a little bit in the wrong place. I don't know if this is necessarily a lethal blow, but anyway, it's a representation of his death, is willing to sacrifice for the good of your people. And Marat contracted a disease. He was very poor. He had to live in the sewers for a particular amount of time, or close to the sewers, or as the legend goes. And he contracted a kind of a rare skin disease, which was very painful. And the only way that he could get some type of relief from this is taking long medicinal baths. And so that's why he's in the bath, and this is where he wrote most of his words. And so, but what we see within this is, again, this idea of being willing to die for a political end. And so something that's particularly important for the members of the Enlightenment and the Neoclassical art. And you can see how he's borrowing ideas from Michelangelo. Here we see kind of almost a quasi-religious image as he's kind of recalling Michelangelo's Pieta in the face of Christ with Marat, who's kind of has this peaceful look in him because he fought for his ideals, and he's willing to die for them as well, and so he can receive peace within that. And then what we see with George Washington, Hudot's a French artist, and he's inspired by George Washington, who's this political idealist. He's bringing these ideas back of, we need to resist authority, we need to have more of a democracy, we need to have a bigger say for the people. And so he becomes this symbol of the neoclassical world, about fighting and being willing to die and to go up against Goliath. The Goliath in this case, with the French Revolution, or with the American Revolution, was England. But this idea of being willing to sacrifice yourself for a political end. And so neoclassical art has this political bent to it. It has these kind of political aspirations to match what's happening within their society with the desire to have political reform. All right, just to leave off here in less than a minute, I wanted you to kind of apply these ideas to works that we haven't necessarily covered. Some of them you may have seen before, but some of them you may not have. And so what I want you to do is I want you to identify the era. This is getting you to apply, right, your critical thinking to some of the themes, the main elements that we see within an era, and to see if you can get it right. So with this one, if you were to take a look at this one, would you say this is Renaissance, Baroque, Rococo, or Neoclassical? And then more importantly, why? Taking a look at this one, is this one Renaissance, Baroque, Rococo, Neoclassical? And then again, why, right? What are some of the attributes that this one has? This one, as we take a look at this one, is this one Renaissance, Baroque, Rococo, or Neoclassical? And then finally this one, as we take a look at this one, is this one Renaissance, Baroque, Rococo, or Neoclassical? The reason why I wanted to do this in this last quiz is because the amount of eras that we're studying are starting to stack up, and I want to make sure that you can differentiate between them as we go through, because that's going to be an important part of the class. It's going to be an important part of your future appreciation of the art, is to be able to see a work of art that you might not be familiar with and at least know roughly when it was created, what time, what era, and what was going on, and what can we understand about that particular culture.